Hi, everyone. My name is James Fahlbusch, and I'm a research biologist at Cascadia Research Collective. Today, I'm going to walk you through what a day working out on the water is like as a whale biologist, and some of the tools and techniques we use to do our research. I'm excited to share a bit more about what's happening in this photo here, but first I'd like to briefly share a bit more about how I got here. I'm originally from Centerport, New York, which is on the North Shore of Long Island. I studied computer science and business administration at Binghamton University, which is in upstate New York. And I recently finished my Ph.D. in biology at the Hopkins Marine Station of Stanford University, which is just a few blocks away from here, actually. And I'm sure you can see by the dates on my degree completions that a lot transpired between my days in New York and my life now. In the intervening time, I did a lot of different things, including working as a commercial scuba diver, then as a boat captain, and ultimately working on scientific research vessels, which is how I ended up standing here before you today. And just so you know that there's many ways to enter this field, one sneaky admission from me is that I have actually no academic background in biology before coming to Stanford to do my PhD. So there's lots of ways to skin a cat. So my time on the water working on boats is probably one of the most important skill sets that I rely on as a research biologist working with Cascadia Research here on the West Coast. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Cascadia is a nonprofit research organization based out of Olympia, Washington, and they've conducted scientific research and education for over 45 years. Most of the research at Cascadia has focused on topics that are important for the protection and management of marine mammals and other species. That conservation focus has shaped my experience over the past 12 years. Most of the projects that I work on are with endangered cetaceans such as blue, fin, and humpback whales. And a lot of that has been looking at the impacts of human activities on marine mammals. One thing that ties all of these projects together is that they all take place out on the water on small boats. While a great deal of research can and does get done from larger vessels, at Cascadia we use an 18 to 24 foot rigid hull inflatable boat to do our research. These boats are small and fast, but they're also incredibly seaworthy, since most of them were designed for use for search and rescue with the Coast Guard. The main feature that we've added to these boats is a pulpit, which is a standing platform over the front of the boat that gives us additional height over the water that we use for spotting animals, taking pictures, and also to do some of the more exciting parts of our research that I'll show you later on in the presentation. So a very important reason that we use these small boats is that they can be trailered, which allows us to very easily work in different regions, or if we get reports of whales in different areas, we can actually go where the whales are. And so I typically spend between 50 and 100 days a year out on the water. And you can see from the survey tracks on the right here, those white lines, that we could be on the remote Oregon coast, operating down out of San Diego, or anywhere in between. And I'm pretty sure I've launched out of every conceivable port on the West Coast, anything from cranes and slings off the waters off Oregon, to tractors and trucks pushing pangas off the beach down in Baja. And I've even been launched off the back of a ship 100 miles offshore. That's the Sproul in Southern California. And so we'll pretty much go wherever the whales take us, weather permitting, of course. And so you can imagine that on small boats like this one, working in conditions like this where the water is glassy and kind, it's much more productive than trying to find whales in something like this. And so in the days leading up to any work that we do, our eyes are glued to the weather forecast to plan our best window for getting out on the water. So instead of trying to go out on Saturday with the winds between 20 and 30 miles an hour, we might pick a day like Monday, which will be much more favorable conditions, and it might make our job a whole lot easier and a whole lot more productive. And so once we have a sense of the weather, we begin to plan a route that will take us through the habitat of the animals that we're hoping to encounter. For example, here's a typical route that we might take for a survey out of Moss Landing to go look for blue whales. from our past surveys, we know that blue whales tend to be found at the edge of the continental shelf, where the ocean depth increases rapidly. And this area called the shelf break, and you can see our planned route transits along these areas in the lighter colored, shallower regions, right along that edge of the shelf break, where it transitions into the deeper regions. And we know this is blue whale habitat. And so we basically sketch a line around the Monterey and Soquel canyons to try and find these animals. And so most of our routes are somewhere between 50 and 100 nautical miles. And we typically spend between 8 and 12 hours out on the water, depending on the weather and the whales. And so on a typical day, we load up all our gear and we launch our boat. Thanks, Jack, for this picture. We head out on the water and begin to do our survey along our planned route. And we move along at about 15 to 20 miles an hour, and you can see we're looking really serious here. This is actually my PhD advisor, Jeremy, on the right, and my lab mate, Dave Cade, who's a legend. But yeah, and me looking unbelievably serious. But and so we move along at about 15 to 20 miles an hour, which allows us to make progress along the route, but also see animals as they surface to breathe. And so as we survey, we have everyone focused very seriously on scanning the horizon for animals, looking for splashes or spouts. And so each person is responsible for a quadrant, so looking out over the left side, the right side, or the center. And we always say that as you survey, your head should be on a swivel. You should just be swinging back and forth, always making sure that you cover a broad area and hopefully not miss any animals as they come up to the surface to breathe, even for a short time. And so when we spot an animal, we use a rugged tablet computer that's sort of waterproof, kind of. And we record what we see, where we see it, and any other details that might be important for our research. And this type of information can be used to better understand the distribution of different species in the region. So here we can see sightings of groups of blue, fin, and humpback whales. So the red are humpback, blue is blue, and magenta is fin whales. And we could see from the sightings of these animals over the course of 5 surveys from a few weeks last summer that there's a lot of overlap between these whales in our region, but there's also a lot of differences. And these surveys help us tease apart these relationships and try to better understand these species. Along with recording data about each encounter, we also use a digital camera with a telephoto lens to photograph each individual that we see. And so these cameras are probably the most important piece of equipment that we use in our research. We use the unique markings on either side of the fluke or the back of the animal to uniquely identify each individual. And Cascadia has maintained a catalog of known individuals for blue, humpback, and gray whales for decades, with new animals constantly being added as we encounter and photograph them. Since 1986, we've had almost 150,000 different encounters with humpback whales here on the West Coast, and we've identified almost 10,000 of them. So being able to identify an individual, it allows us to understand where they go. For example, these are the sightings from the same individuals connecting the migration between summer feeding regions and winter breeding regions as a part of a collaborative project called SPLASH that occurred back between 2004 and 2006. This project had over 300 collaborators and over 18,000 ID photos. And this gave us a better idea of the movements and interchange of feeding and breeding areas across different populations. For example, the humpback whales we see here in Monterey Bay are likely spending their winter breeding season in Mexico or in Costa Rica in blue, so down off to the bottom right of the screen. We also use the resighting of known individuals to make population abundance estimates, which are critical evaluations of how populations are doing over time. Here we can see that the California and Oregon humpback whale population is growing at around 7.5%, which is a significant recovery after being nearly wiped out by industrial whaling. When the weather's good enough, we're also able to launch and retrieve drones from the pulpit of our boats. And so we bring up the drone onto the pulpit and slowly start to spin it up and get the motors running. And hopefully it flies. And so aerial imagery can give us a bird's eye view of the interspecies interactions, like the humpbacks and sea lions shown here in Monterey Bay, actually. Oh, sorry, I'm going a little fast. It can also help us make sense of extraordinary events, like this humpback whale supergroup feeding on krill off the coast of South Africa from a few years back. There were over 100 animals in a 1 kilometer square area, which is absurd. Yeah, kind of a good day. It could also help us look at animals like blue whales here in Monterey Bay. So this was back in 2017, and we also had what we would call a supergroup of these animals back then as well. It was a similar density of blue whales, but not quite as many in one area. Not quite as many of them, but a lot of them all in a small area. In addition to the context that the aerial imagery provides, if you know the altitude of the drone and the properties of its camera, you can use the lengths of known objects, such as a boat, to make measurements of whales using these drones. So from these downward-facing images, you can measure the width of the animal at regular intervals to get an estimate of the animal's health and body condition, so how fat the animal is and how much it's been eating. And you can also measure the overall body length of the animal. For example, in 2017 and 2018, we measured 36 blue and 64 humpback whales here in Monterey Bay, and we found that on average, blue whales here were 22 meters long, which is about 73 feet, while humpbacks were 11 meters long, which is about 37 feet. And the largest blue whale that we measured was 25 meters, or over 82 feet long. So pretty cool. Finally, as you all know, what goes in must come out. And so on the infrequent but not uncommon event that we witness a whale defecation, we actually use a pool net to collect fecal samples. Again, thank you, Jack, for the photo. So this is me actually collecting some fecal sample from a humpback whale a few days ago out near the Farallon Islands. Don't worry, I washed my hands. And you can see by the sort of pinkish color that we actually think that this animal was eating krill. That's the color of krill poo. But you can actually use the fecal sample to know what the animals were feeding on pretty recently through their digestive system. You can actually also find the undigested mandibles of krill or other critters in there and measure them under a microscope to see actually how big the krill were that they were eating. So super cool stuff. And work by my colleague Matt Savoca at Stanford University has been, he's been using fecal samples to better understand whether these animals are ingesting plastic as they feed. And so a blue whale filters about a swimming pool's worth amount of water with each gulp. And plastic and microplastics are often found in the waters off California. So there's a good chance these animals are inadvertently consuming plastics. And so Dr. Savoca's been filtering the fecal samples to determine how much. You'll have to stay tuned and maybe wait for a talk from him to hear about those results. So we've gotten a pretty good sense of some of the tools and techniques we use to directly observe whales from the surface. But while surface observations are incredibly important, in order to better understand these animals, we need a more complete picture. And so we have a few tools to see what animals are doing beneath the surface when we can't directly observe them ourselves. To study free-ranging wildlife, scientists have used biologging techniques, which is the use of miniaturized animal-attached tags for logging and relaying data about the animal's movements, behavior, physiology, or even their environment. And it's been used across a range of animals, from seals to birds to sharks, and now also to whales. So Cascadia Research, along with the Goldbogen Lab at Stanford University, have pioneered the use of animal-borne multi-sensor video tags for studying large cetaceans. These tags are attached with suction cups, and they have accelerometers that measure gravity, which allows us to calculate the animal's orientation, like its pitch and roll, but also its speed. Magnetometers that measure the Earth's magnetic field, which is almost like a compass. So it gives us the animal's heading. GPS tells us geographically where the animals are going. They also measure sound using an underwater microphone, which is known as a hydrophone. And finally, they record video to give us a contextual understanding of the animal's behaviors underwater. And so what does this look like? Here we're following a tagboat using a drone as we approach a pair of blue whales in Monterey Bay. And so there's a tagger on the front of the boat holding a long 5-meter pole, so it's about a 25-foot pole. And we're sort of communicating between the tagger and the driver. I'm the one actually driving the boat in this round. But we're trying to get a sense for where the animals are going, how they're heading, and how we can best approach them. And so we're sort of coming up into a position where we'll have a good chance of being able to put a tag on them. You'll start to see a pair of blue whales breathing off to the left here. And so we find ourselves, well, maybe I'll just let it do the talking. No need to narrate. But yeah, so my colleague, I think it's Dave Cade on the bow there, one of my lab mates who has been a great influence on my research. And so he extends the pole, and so we position ourselves just back behind the whale, so just beyond its fluke. And we're sort of waiting for an opportunity for when it's about to breathe. So when it commits to come up to breathe, it raises its head, and we sort of just approach with the boat and pop a little tag on. So in other situations, the animals might be moving more slowly. So this is a group of humpback whales in Monterey Bay back in 2015, about a mile off Moss Landing. And you can see there's several individuals nearby and tons of birds and sea lions. And so it just takes us a second to figure out which animal is the best one to put a tag on. But one comes up just beside the boat, and we're able to place one on. And so once this tag is deployed, it records continuously until it pops off. So the panel below is going to show sensor data that sync to the video, and also the current readings in the video are denoted in the time index. And so it gives us the depth, the speed, a metric called jerk, but also pitch and roll and heading. And so we've deployed more than 200 of these tags on cetaceans off California, and these have elucidated some of the ways that whales feed on different prey, which are anchovies here in this case. You can see that ball of anchovies. There's also other whales. It is insane. There's also, tight aggregations of other whales, sea lions and seabirds. So everything is feeding on all the same things, and we wouldn't get this context without some of these tags. So it gives us these really amazing views into the lives of these animals. Sometimes the tags also provide a whale's eye view of other animals feeding. And so for those of you not familiar with how humpback whales feed, they approach their prey, they open their mouth and engulf a huge quantity of prey-laden water, and then slowly filter that water out using their baleen. And so they expand that pouch, their buccal pouch. And so that's all called a lunge, and they do this lunge feeding. They could do this continuously throughout the day. You could see all the krill in the water that the animal's feeding on. This is actually a part of that super group that we were looking at earlier in South Africa. So this is all krill down in the southern hemisphere. But it really gives you a really good view of the throat pleats and the expansion of that buccal pouch. So that's what allows them to consume small-bodied prey, and it makes them very efficient at this. It's really cool. And so using the tag sensors, we can also recreate the underwater movements of these animals and get a better sense of how they're using their habitat. So this is the movements of a humpback whale at Stellwagen Bank in Massachusetts. And so these spiraling movements may make you confused thinking about what is this animal doing. But it does help to know that these animals are creating a net of bubbles to corral their prey. And so they spin around in these spirals and make a bubble net, which condenses all the prey into the middle. And so they then lunge up into the middle of it and consume what's being collected in the middle. So super cool. And these animals do this, I've never seen it here in California, but they do it in Alaska, they do it in Antarctica, and in Massachusetts as well. So yeah, super cool. This is an example. We can also use this to look at how these different behaviors differ between different species. So this is a blue whale, which just has a slightly different way of doing it. So it's gonna, yeah, well, I'll let that go. I didn't play it as I liked, but this is lunge feeding vertically on krill. So blue whales just feed slightly differently than a humpback in this instance. And it might look something like this. This is sort of what was happening in that same, in that video, but in actual video time. So we can see that the feeding process is very similar for blue whales, only bigger and a whole lot more water being engulfed. So we've used tag data to better understand the timing of these lunges. And so here's a similar maneuver being performed by an animal here in Monterey Bay, a blue whale. And in the data that's matched to the video, we can see that the animal, the green line is the animal's speed. And so as it approaches this prey, its speed, it goes faster and faster. It needs to accelerate up to about 4 meters per second, or about 9 miles an hour. And you can see, watch that area right there where the red is in the video, but you'll see as it gets to the prey, as it reaches its maximum speed, it'll open its mouth, and it's like a parachute. The animal will stop, and you'll see that green line just drop off. So it's basically stopping itself with this huge expansion of its buccal pouch as it engulfs a whole bunch of krill. So there it's opening its mouth, and you'll see the throat start to expand, and you see all the krill. You can hear it hitting the camera. These are all little krill that are popping past the tag. So as we saw from the previous video, you can imagine that every time a blue whale opens its mouth, it's like opening a parachute. And this shows up quite clearly in the sensor data. So this is what we call a kinematic signature of lunge feeding, and we can actually use this to know a lot more about, to be able to identify lunges even when we don't have videos. So for example, tags that don't have cameras, or when animals are feeding in the dark, super deep, and it allows us to determine exactly when, where, and how often these animals are feeding, which is really critical for understanding their ecology. Okay. And our research group has also worked to adapt these tags to measure the heart rate of free-swimming whales, which I think is pretty incredible. You can imagine that we can't just swim up next to a blue whale and measure its heart rate with a stethoscope. And so we developed a tag that has electrodes in the suction cups, similar to a cardiac event monitor that we'd see at the hospital. And so we were actually the first group to measure the heart rate of a blue whale. And this happened a few years back here in Monterey Bay, actually. So along with Dr. Paul Panganis at UCSD, UC San Diego, and Jeremy Goldbogen's lab at Stanford, we found that during a dive, a blue whale's heart beats generally between 4 and 8 times a minute, but it can slow to as low as 2 beats per minute. Think about how slow that is. And its heart, each beat lasts about 1.8 seconds, which also is insane. But we also found that during lunges, it increases its heart rate to 20 beats per minute, much like our heart rate would increase during exercise. So it shows that lunging is actually sort of an energetic event. And you might remember that we saw that the speed increase, that acceleration up to 4 meters per second, it causes its heart rate to come up. And then during the filtration phase, it comes back down. Then when the animal ascends to the surface, the heart rate increases to about 25 to 40 beats per minute. You know, I think we're all here probably sitting around 60. I'm maybe up at around 90 beats per minute just because I'm a little nervous, but it's kind of wild to think that a blue whale's maximum heart rate might be around 40 beats per minute. So pretty neat. So yeah. And so aside from measuring data about the animal's biology and ecology, these tags are also useful for understanding interactions between whales and humans. So a growing conservation concern worldwide is the interaction between ships and whales. And as far as I know, an adult blue whale does not have any predators. and they just haven't evolved to avoid ships. And so these days, ships are moving at higher rates, and there's more and more ships each year. So here in California, we have two major shipping ports, both in areas of high whale density, so LA Long Beach and San Francisco Bay. And so increasingly, ships are the cause of mortality, and this is a concern for the recovery of these species, especially for blue whales. And so, as an example, in 2016, we deployed an acoustic tag on a blue whale near the Farallon Island, so a tag that recorded the sounds of the ocean. And it stayed on the animal for 11 days. And so this animal spent considerable time in all three shipping lanes that direct ships into and out of San Francisco Bay, and that's that yellow track there. And the shipping lanes there are shown in red. So that's the sort of traffic scheme for ships coming in and out of San Francisco Bay. There's actually also another animal that's being tracked here. You actually see where I keep the boat down in Half Moon Bay. That was my trip after I picked up the tag, drove down to Half Moon Bay, and then you could see where I was living in San Francisco at the time. Anyway, I had forgotten to turn the tag off, but all that aside, this was an acoustic tag. So not only did we get information on overlap with the shipping lanes, but we also had information about the soundscape of the animal. So over this 11-day period, this animal dove and moved around the area. We found at least 11 close encounters with ships based on a clear acoustic signal of the ship on the tag. So that's what those regular red sounds are actually the sounds of a ship on a hydrophone. And so this is a stark example of the need to better understand the risk that ships pose to these animals. Okay, so today I described some of the tools that we use on a typical day out on the water as a whale biologist. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, I actually only spend between 50 and 100 days a year out on the water. And so a typical day for me is actually spent at a desk behind my computer. So any of you all out there who might be interested in this type of work, boat skills are definitely encouraged, but computer skills are perhaps a little more important. So I'm just gonna end by saying that I've been incredibly fortunate to be able to work in such an amazing system with such charismatic animals and with such amazing people. So thank you all for listening. If you want to donate to Cascadia to help fund this research, please reach out to me or find out more on our website. And with that, I'll just say thanks. Yeah, wonderful. I mean, I'll take any question, anyone you got. Yeah.
So, I had a question about the tags themselves. Do you have to recover them? It seems like they're transmitting data right away, but when you recover them, do you ever recover? I know you're dying to answer, but do you ever recover them, and then is there additional information you get from them?
Yeah, so actually our group, we actually don't really use tags that transmit. We only use tags that we have to recover. So every tag that I showed you today is something that has been recovered. So basically we have a set of receiving gear that's a VHF transmitter that we put on the tag, and we're able to locate it again after it pops off the animal. So all of our tags float, and we go and recover them, and that often leads to some of the most interesting and crazy adventures, as some folks in the room will likely attest to. But we've had to go, sometimes you put a tag on an animal and it will go somewhere else. So we're often, some of our days are, spent going out to, Jack and I last summer went 180 miles each way on a boat to go find a tag down by Guadalupe Island in Mexico. So we left out of San Diego and went on a boat for, I think we were on for 20 hours straight, moving at 30 miles an hour. So, but yeah, so it's often, the reason for that is that these are sampling a lot of information multiple times a second. so it ends up being, when you download a tag, it's gigabytes of data that's being stored on it. And so that would be more than could ever be transmitted through the sort of satellite systems. So all of our tags, a lot of times folks are putting out satellite type tags, and they're often very limited in the type, the content of the information that they can transmit in that context. So you're often only able to get a couple of position data per day or something like that. So, but yeah, we're able to get, video and audio and movements and everything. So it's a really cool thing. But yeah, we do recover them. Gosh, that's a lot of good questions. I don't have an order, so I think we have plenty of time. So I'm just going to run right to left, and we'll go. Oh gosh. So ranging, the tags are, something around. I should have brought one. I'm so sorry. My gosh. Dang. They're about this big, and the cost is, and they weigh maybe about 3 pounds or something, or two pounds, and they cost between $5,000 and $20,000. But they are reusable. So a lot of these tags, we have a Hall of Fame. We've got ones that have been on like 60 or 70 different animals and have done some really cool journeys. So they do get reused. So price per deployment goes down with each additional one. So it ends up being kind of relatively cost effective. So, but yeah, somewhere in that range. And yeah, the price changes depends on the sensors that you have on the tag. A video tag might be more expensive than a location only tag, and there's some gradations between all of that. So yeah, of course. Just that, yeah. You in the blue. No, we're really careful about that. And when we approach, you saw in that one video, ultimately a lot of what we're doing is very calculated. Our goal for our research is to impact these animals as little as we possibly can. And so a lot of our interactions with animals, which is in the sense of like is to approach for as short an amount of time as we can and get it and back off and not interact with it anymore and let the tag do the work. So a lot of times that's sort of our approach. And so we do have limitations on how many times we can even try to approach the same animal from our permit. So ultimately we take that very seriously, and we certainly care a lot about these animals. So, but yeah, go on. There has been some research. They've been trying to put sound producing devices to to sort of like alert animals to ships coming, that type of thing. On the East Coast, they were doing that as an attempt for right whales. I don't think that it was effective, but it's a tough problem. A lot of times for something like a ship, the only real solution is to slow a ship down. A fast-moving ship will likely kill a whale, whereas a slow-moving ship, you have a lot higher chances of survival. But yeah, next.
I'm wondering if, when you're doing the measurements of the
Yeah.
can you tell if an animal is pregnant? And if you can't see that, do you follow it up?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. I think you're right. I think it could be, seeing a wide animal might signify that. But actually, I don't think we're making that assessment on the water. But we do actually. I didn't mention it, but we also, one of the tools we use actually is we take small biopsies of these animals using a crossbow and a sort of small, short dart that takes a very small plug of skin, and from that, actually, we're able to do genetic analyses and, and find out which population they're a part of, but also we're able to determine pregnancy rates, which is really, really valuable. And so we're actually seeing some of the research out of Antarctica showing that, places where there's a ton of food, recovering whale populations will breed more rapidly, more often, because if the food's really good. And so we're seeing things like that responses to like good prey conditions. So it's kind of neat, but we are able to determine pregnancy using skin and blubber samples. Yeah. Oh God, we're good. I want to get to the left side of the room. I'm sorry, guys. I'll get there, I promise. One more for this item.
Well, I know you say they haven't evolved to recognize ships as a threat, but what is your best understanding of why they don't transfer there? Because obviously they sense other whales.
So I have a really good thought there. A ship is about 1,000 feet long, and the noise-making part is at the back, and the killing part is at the front. So I think that ultimately that's probably the main issue, is that they hardly hear the bow of the boat. They hear that they might not even be disturbed by the something 1,000 feet away. So that's my take on it. But they're also, we find this actually when we tag them, when they're in feeding mode, like they are focused on that. And so that's part of their evolution, is to get food to maintain that huge body size. And so often I think they're immersed in feeding, and so they're often not considering, maybe that's my thought, things that are happening outside of that. Okay, moving on further along. I know you've been asked. Yeah. No. Yeah.
I was just curious,
Oh shoot.
you're using drones
Yeah.
for like aerial photography and stuff like that. Have there been any applications with like thermal or multispectral drones into like tracking, like underwater tracking, which is also aerial?
So yeah, the underwater tracking, not so much, just because you lose and once it's beneath the surface, you would lose any of that thermal. The water consumes the thermal image. But we do. That's a really good question and a really good point. We do use thermal imagery. We've been trying to develop using one of these FLIR cameras, which is a thermal camera, to measure the blow height. So we're trying to find out how much air they're breathing, and so we're using it for that purpose. But yeah, that's still sort of that might be a talk that somebody like Ashley gives 2 years from now or something like that. So, but yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah. And up front. Oh, sorry, up front. I just wanted to make sure I keep nodding to the one person in the front. I'm sorry. Several questions. Oh boy. Oh gosh, yeah. I would say, the most commonly thing that we do is like location of animal. Like we saw an animal and we note its location. That's like the first, that piece of data comes with every sighting, every encounter, right? And then all of these other tools, like sometimes some of them don't even come out on the boat. Like we went out and on a survey the other day out to the Farallones, and we didn't bring any tags. We didn't even have anything like that on the boat, mostly because we were not feeling like we didn't have the weather was going to turn bad, and we thought about whether we'd be able to recover the tags if they popped off in bad weather. So that was one of the decisions we made, was just not to bring it. And so I think collecting information about what we see and where we see it, that happens pretty much with every animal that we see. And then beyond that, photographs, that's the second order. Yeah, and that's probably, 80 or 80%. Some animals don't provide a fluke. They're not in a behavioral mode that will show you an ideable or some, ideable portion of their body that will be able to be linked to other photographs of them. Some of them don't do that all the time. So that's probably, 70 or 80% of the animals are. Please. Of course. So if any of you ever go on to Happy Whale, you will probably see a CRC in dash in front of the ID of pretty much every animal. That's the Cascadia catalog, and so the Happy Whale is used the catalog of Cascadia that we partnered with them for them to create Happy Whale. Yeah, no, it's good, but no, it's a great. It's an unbelievable tool. It has led to some amazing discoveries about interchange and life history. So I think it's amazing. But yeah, so we're very connected, and they've been a great partner. So yeah, back to you. Sorry about that. Yes.
I was curious about the whale-ship interaction. Why don't these accidents? Can you tell sort of like a majority of time when these accidents happen?
Yeah,
Can you track that?
well, yeah, that's a really good question. If you have more, I'll let you keep going. Sorry.
Well, no, just that interaction, and do these accidents happen more at night or during the day? And to kind of tap onto the first question about why don't they see these huge?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, those are really good questions. So to get at the sort of how we know about these things, often, honestly, it's because whales wash up ashore. And so you can do a necropsy, a dissection of a dead animal to figure out how it died. And often it's when you dissect these animals, you'll see the blunt force trauma of a ship strike. So you can see that was how it passed. So that's sort of one of the ways that we do that. But also, there's been ships that have come into port not knowing that they had a whale draped over the front of their bed. So ultimately, ships sometimes don't even know that they hit whales. And so there's probably unseen whale strikes that don't end up being reported and don't wash up ashore. And so we think it is a real problem, and it could actually be, one of the reasons why some of these species are not recovering quite as quickly as they should be. And sorry, what was the second part of your question? I forgot.
that was pretty much it.
Yeah, awesome.
Why don't they know?
Yeah.
Really grasp the concept
Yeah.
of giant metal?
Yeah, well, that's one thing. And then, so ships are quiet probably at the bow, and so quiet but lethal at the bow, and more loud at the stern. So one of the things that we did find also was that, oh gosh, it's 11:42. I'm getting, sorry, was that animals spend more time near the surface at night. And so they might be more vulnerable at times when ships cannot see them. And so at night, they're mostly feeding during the day at depth, and then at night they're kind of resting, recovering, and so that might put them at more at risk at night than they would be at daytime because of that. So, Dan, how are we doing on time?
One more question.
One more question, good. Out on the distant shores.
I have a question about any interactions that you were witnessing during your time on the water, just watching the animals in preparation of packing, and what you're finding on the video from the time. Are there any kind of interspecies or kind of relationships between other animals that help you steer the trip?
Well, that one humpback video that we saw, that's fascinating to see that basically it seems like all of these animals are interacting with the same prey ball. They're all consuming the same anchovies. So there's birds coming in, and there's actually a cool video of there's a bird that actually so a whale takes a lunge, and some of the fish escape. And so as the whale is swimming past, the fish are kind of in the vortices of the whale's back, and a bird actually comes down. It was a shearwater, a sort of a wing swimming bird was going down, and it nabs the fish right off the whale's back. So there could be some of these sort of mutualistic interactions that are happening out on the bay. We don't know whether, do all of these species sort of work together to sort of corral these things, or do they all just sort of benefit from the balling of the fish and eat until it's gone, sort of thing. So I think that there are, in all of the data that we've collected, there are many PhDs worth of analyses that could happen. So you know, I think we haven't even scratched the surface of some of these things, but it is super fascinating. Thank you all so much